Here is a conversation I had with Daily Negativity. We discuss metaethics and reach an interesting point of contact between our views. I link to his YouTube channel in the description. Enjoy.
So where should we start? I mean, I guess should we just maybe start by talking about your I hesitate to say new position because I know that this, you said that you're sort of still working out your new kind of meta-ethical views. So I guess I have some questions about it. Like, the first, it is a non-cognitivist view, right? So, like, in other words, on your view, ethical sentences don't express propositions. That is, like, they can't be true or false. They're neither true nor false. Just want to make sure I have that right. So the new view you're kind of working with, exploring, is a non-cognitivist view. Is that right?
In a way, yes, but I would like to say at least two things about this. I think that there is this maybe not explicitly expressed feeling in philosophy where non-cognitivist positions are treated as worse. So they seem to be a fallback position when you cannot handle the truth, so to speak. You somehow fall back on a way to still preserve morality and maybe moral claims, but you have to say that they actually mean something else. And they are indeed treated as worse than cognitivist positions. And I think this is an unjustified bias, because there are plenty of things we as humans do that no one would even want to argue that could be cognitivist or non-cognitivist understandings of, yet we find value in them. And it can be a simple thing like cooking or solving crossword puzzles or solving jigsaw puzzles or building a house. This is not a cognitivist. I mean, you cannot, I think, come up with a cognitivist position regarding building houses, because this is not domain of claims about how the world is, but it is a domain of action.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I wanted to say is regarding what you said at the beginning, like about, how many people think that, or they just see non-cognitivist views as you say, like worse. And that's certainly like that's true for, obviously like cognitivists probably see it as worse, right? I think though it's still a fairly popular view. I'm not sure, but I think there's certainly lots of philosophers who are non-cognitivists, and so it's still a fairly certainly a respectable position, at least, right? But I guess my question is, because I know you said this was, I think this is just like a private exchange, but it seems like you want to make room for like correct judgments, though, right? Like, so you don't want to say that moral claims or moral utterances, whatever, are true, but certain actions can be appropriate or like correct on your view. And I guess I wanted to hear you kind of say more about that, because it seems to me like it gets awfully close, when we start talking about what's the appropriate or correct action. So like if somebody's, say like a child is drowning, and you might say, I don't know exactly what your view is on this, but like you might say the appropriate or correct thing to do is to help that child. Yeah, I just want to hear you say a little bit more about what that really amounts to, I guess, or what that means for you. Like when you say that action is the correct action. Let's say, just walking past the child is incorrect. Do you want to say a little bit more about that, like correctness, appropriateness?
Sure, and I will start in the abstract, and maybe later we'll go to specific examples. So even saying that a given claim is true it is not so obvious what it means, because it's not the case that we have only one commonly understood notion of truth. In fact, there are 3 or 5 major theories of truth, and they seem to be incompatible. So even saying that it is true that we should help this child, it's not really obvious what it means. It seems to be assumed that we are operating on a properly understood and commonly accepted definition or theory of truth. But when we think about this more, it seems to me that actually there probably will be more disagreement about that, specifically when it comes to moral propositions. And so going further from this, when I look at all those theories of truth and also on behavior, such as playing chess, for example, where we have appropriate or valid moves to make, we can then figure out a cloud of concepts that revolve around this. So it would be correctness, appropriateness, maybe fitting or fittingness, accuracy, validity, and others. It seems to me that our understanding of what truth is somehow grounded in those more basic terms like correctness, accuracy, appropriateness. So for example, when you have the correspondence theory of truth, it basically means that a sentence is true if it corresponds to the reality. But it's not really so easy to even tell what this correspondence means. How does a sentence correspond to reality? But we can say that at least what is expressed by this sentence fits reality or is a correct description of reality in some way. Or this correspondence is correct rather than perturbed or whatever. So when I see these more basic concepts, I have a feeling that it is possible to talk in a more either general or more fundamental way about what is right and wrong, because we have the notion of correctness and incorrectness. And if we have something like a very fundamental and properly understood correctness, then I don't need to say that a moral claim can be properly explained or understood through the epistemic notion that uses one of the major theories of truth, yet it is still correct. Just like many other activities or things that we say and do, also including language, are correct even though we wouldn't necessarily use a theory of truth to analyze this.
So there's a lot there. I guess one question I had is like, I'm just wondering what makes certain actions correct, I guess? Like in virtue of what, like, or is it, maybe that's the wrong question, but it just seems like, if we say the correct thing to do is provide aid or save the drowning child, I'm just wondering, is there an answer, do you think, to like question what is it that makes that the correct thing? Is there some more basic fact or something that, like, for example, you might say, well, if you don't help the drowning child, that child will be harmed. And like, or there's disvalue there or something like that. Is there something in virtue of which that action or, is the correct one as opposed to, again, just letting them drown?
I don't think I would be able to provide a very general answer to this question, and I think I would like to start from something easier rather than going deep into the moral domain. So when you are doing a jigsaw puzzle, then would you also be able to ask a sensible question like that in virtue of what the specific mini action of putting a puzzle piece into this place is correct or not?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think then I guess then I would ask why play, that game. So like why play the moral game at all, so to speak? Like why, I mean, because you could live your life, just in a very self-interested way or something, right? Like you don't, I guess I'm wondering like on that view, how do you handle the person who is just an egoist and who just says, I'm just not going to play by those rules, Because it seems like, the jigsaw, like to kind of stick to that sort of analogy, like, yeah, the actions are correct or appropriate, but they only really make sense within that, context, right? Like once you accept, okay, I'm going to do a puzzle, right? And you accept that end, then there are certain appropriate actions. I mean, you could, you don't have to, right? Like, I guess I'm wondering, like, what's the reason? I mean, it goes back to that very old question, right? Like, why be moral? And I guess I'm kind of wondering why, on your view, should one, just play this moral game?
So it seems like when someone is already put in the social context, one is already playing the game. So we are in the situation where we are already on the table solving this jigsaw puzzle because we are in this social context.
Okay.
I mean, the only thing that one could then do maybe would be to walk away from the game, from the table, or somehow from society, I think. because the society already plays the game and you are one of the participants. So it's not like you first have to make the choice to go through the woods and enter a society and decide whether I want to solve a jigsaw puzzle or whether I want to play the moral game. You already are embedded in this context.
Are you saying in virtue of being in a society, or are you saying just in virtue of being alive in a world with other beings? Because if it's dependent, say, on like being in a human society or something, where there are agreements that are understood between people. I'm not sure if that's what you're saying, but if you're saying something like that, then I feel like that might run into some of the same kind of, I think, difficulties that like contract theories run. Like because say you're just in the woods, right? Like you're not part of any society, or any human society. I take it you wouldn't think that it's okay or correct to, just hurt wild animals for fun or something. That would not. I guess I mean, would that already be a kind of society in your view? Like, I guess what is a society? Is it just in virtue of being again here, like in among other beings is that sufficient, I guess?
Yes, I think so. So this society, I think we can maybe the example of society was too narrow and unfortunate. But once we are in a world with other beings, we are at the table solving the jigsaw puzzle. So we just have to figure out the correct or the valid moves and maybe using various tools like reason, empathy, and whatever else.
Right. Right. So you're saying reason plays a role. So I feel like practically it's not so different from the sort of view that I try to defend, where, ethics is based on reasoning, basically. Because you're saying that, I mean, would you say that some actions are irrational then, morally? So like, or not, well, maybe not morally, but like basically some actions, they're not only wrong, but they're not rational. And so they're also incorrect. But like, I guess how much of a role is reason playing for you? Do they pretty much coincide? Like, what's moral is what's rational, kind of thing.
So this is yet another problem that I see in my current understanding of philosophy, where reason and rationality seem to be somewhat essentialized. So some people maybe think that there is something like an essence of reason, or there is a very special part of the mind that does reason or does rationality. But when we look at, for example, cognitive science or psychology, we have other notions that are probably more precise, like intelligence. Even if we don't understand intelligence properly, we already know that intelligence is also about proper thinking or proper solving of problems, and it's not restricted to inference, like linking various propositions together, coming from premises to conclusions. And it's, in one sense, it is wider than the notions of reason and rationality, and in yet another sense the notion of intelligence seems to be more naturalized. That is, we can think of it like as a part of a living being and not just some disembodied floating reason. So maybe it would be good to look at various other activities where we can say that someone does something correct or incorrect, and probably when we say something like this, we can use the notion of intelligence, but maybe we wouldn't use the notion of rationality or reason. Like in the example of solving a jigsaw puzzle, are we making inferences using reason or are we behaving rationally? There certainly is intelligence involved to solve the puzzle, to see how the pieces fit together, and there are clearly incorrect moves, like fitting a piece upside down. There are correct moves, and this more general understanding of correct engagement with the world or correct engagement with various problems and with domains. This is something that I'm somehow trying to think through and figure out.
Okay, yeah. And I'm not sure if this is maybe this is one of the aspects of the you're still thinking through, but like I guess I do wonder how what's the how do we arrive at these rules? So with like a puzzle, in a way the rules are given to us, they're right there on the box, it's like this is how you play with this thing. But with ethics, we find ourselves in the world with other beings, and we just start constructing rules. I'm just kind of wondering how we do that. What is there some kind of method that you think that you favor, or how do we arrive at these rules? Maybe not sure if you have a fully kind of worked out view about that, but I would kind of wonder.
I'm not sure if there is a very general way that we engage with all the various domains where we can say there are correct behaviors and incorrect behaviors or actions, but it seems like just like with, I don't know, architecture or technology, we somehow are able to make progress. Even though we wouldn't say that one way of building a house is true or false, we can say that there are certain ways of building doors or windows that are worse or better, and there are certainly things that we could possibly do that are definitely wrong, incorrect. And if something works, then we would say that this is correct. So I think there is a long process that we as people, as humans, as rational and thinking beings engage in various domains, including also morality. But I definitely wouldn't be able to say that there is a very neat way that we come across some moral truths or something like that. Probably it's very complicated and there are moves forward and backward, just like in many other domains.
But you are saying, just as somebody who, say, insists that their, say, building that's just falling apart is the correct or is a good building, you're kind of saying that even if someone insists that torturing children for fun or something is good or moral,
Yeah.
these people are wrong, right? Like you're saying these are okay. Okay, so there is, yeah. So it's not a okay, yeah, okay. I mean, would you consider it realism? I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, obviously, it does depend on people understand realism in different ways.
Yes, because usually realism is a cognitivist position, and I'm just wondering how would you go about realism with respect to riding a bike?
The non-cognitive. Oh, I mean, yeah. I guess you're saying it's a non-cognitive. Okay. Well, can I ask you this? What is it? So, again, so non-cognitivist theories basically say that moral sentences don't express opposition. So, like, some people say they express, I guess, like emotions or imperatives. What, on your view, what do they express? Are they like imperatives, or are they? Because they're not propositions. So I guess what would you say on your view? What are we expressing when we make these utterances?
I think there are various types of moral claims. So when one says it's wrong to torture children for fun, I think it can be considered as a statement of a proposition. But when someone says you should help those in need, then it's not an expression of a proposition. Someone isn't trying to say how the world is, but this is something like something similar to a command. This is another form of engagement with another human being to somehow, quote unquote, manipulate him into behaving in a certain way, in a correct way.
So then a statement like it's wrong to torture children for fun, you're saying that is at least trying to express a proposition. But I take it on your view, was it false? I mean, because you're saying that kind of sentence is actually at least attempting to express a proposition. But I mean, would you kind of be like an error theorist with regard to those sorts of sentences? In other words, like you're basically saying, that those are just all false, right? Or are you just kind of maybe you don't? I'm not sure if because you're saying that some ways that we use language to talk about morality, like some of them seem like propositions, and others are more like maybe commands, as you say, right? But the ones that act like propositions and that I guess you're saying are propositions or expressing propositions. I guess what's your view on those? Like, are you saying those are just confused, like false?
Yeah, so getting back to this tentative idea that there are different types of statements that we make in the moral domain, there are also different types of things that we do when we solve a jigsaw puzzle. You can say it's wrong to put the pieces upside down, right? And this expresses a proposition, and we can say that this statement is true and it is truth apt. But solving the puzzle is more than just saying these types of things. And in the moral domain, we can say that we communicate a lot of things about the moral domain, like torturing children for fun is wrong. And we also do other things like making those directives, like saying what other people should do, for example, and actually doing those actions that are either correct or incorrect. So I think we can make a clear parallel between these two examples, between the moral domain, where we have propositions about moral domain, so they function just like stores of knowledge that we want to communicate to others. And in the jigsaw puzzle, we also have these stores of knowledge that we can communicate to people. But in both cases, we also have probably even more important level or layer where we do not need to say that something is true or false, but there still are some correct and incorrect actions.
Right. So if I say it's wrong, again, let's just keep using that example, to torture children for fun, you're saying that's a true statement? I mean, we're obviously assuming that that is wrong. Are you saying, even on your view, you could still regard that as a true proposition?
I think so. I think I can say that this proposition is true, just like the proposition it is wrong to put the pieces upside down is also true. So there is this layer of propositions and yet another level of engagement that also includes utterances, so speech acts, which don't necessarily need to be true. So when I tell you put this piece in that place or on the bottom or near the red flower, then I'm not expressing a proposition. Yet we can say that I'm trying to do something, maybe something that will allow us to correctly solve the puzzle. And when I say, let's help this kid who is drowning, then I'm doing basically the same thing. I'm not expressing a proposition, but I'm uttering a speech act in order to coordinate a correct behavior. And I think that in both cases, I can say that this behavior is correct, even though it's obviously not true.
It almost sounds like you are a cognitivist with respect to some sorts of sentences, but not with respect to other ones. So if I say again, wrong to torture, it seems like you're taking a cognitivist position on those sorts of sentences. But if I say don't torture children, well, that's not that's like a command, right? So that's neither true nor false. Seems appropriate to say that those are not truth apt. It's almost like you're not really abandoning the cognitivist position. It seems like you're just adding to it, or you're saying, yeah, but there's more to the story. Like there's more we should say about this. But still, you're kind of saying what a cognitivist would say, aren't you? Like with respect to those like sentences about it's wrong to do such and such.
To be honest, I don't know yet. I will either consider such propositions as, for example, corresponding to reality, or I will just say that these statements transmit knowledge about moral domain. And of course, knowledge doesn't need to be a propositional knowledge, but someone can still express this knowledge or somehow hint using language to this knowledge. So when someone tells you what to do when you are trying to learn how to drive a car or a bike or whatever, then they are also trying to express they are trying to teach you by expressing some knowledge in language. And this language, even though it looks grammatically as statement, it's not the case that in all cases these are expressions of propositions such that with the intention of directly corresponding to reality or describing the states of affairs.
Yeah, did you want to say a little bit about why you're drawn to this position in the first place? I mean, because, so like with a sentence, say like that chair over there is blue or something like that, I assume like you're perfectly fine with that being true. So what is it about, I guess what I'm asking is why are you drawn to the non-cognitivist view? Like what are some of the worries, I guess, you have with respect to like cognitivist views? I know that you, in the past, I think like you expressed, well, you thought that there were kind of metaphysically implausible sort of, or just weighty metaphysical kind of, or ontological maybe commitments that you think you're kind of trying to avoid maybe by taking this non-cognitivist position. I mean, is that right? Or like, basically, what's the advantage, I guess? What theoretically, like, what do you see as the advantage of taking that sort of position and not one that says that, these are moral judgments are really true? And yeah.
You got it exactly right. In the cognitivist way of thinking, we also have to postulate something that will make this statement true. And it's not really easy to do. You either postulate some realm of forms or patterns or relations that the statement, it is wrong to torture children for fun, is wrong. Such a proposition somehow would exist in a weird way. I'm not sure what would make it true if we were to go with this line of thinking. And on the other hand, there are various types of speech acts where we are perfectly fine with making them and we don't bother with trying to say they are true or false. And yet another reason is that, well, there are other things that people do except for speaking, where we also have correct and incorrect things, actions and things like that. So for me, it just seems to fit into one picture, and I'm just trying to maybe explore a link between these three items.
Yeah, I wonder what you think about this. So I also don't like the idea, as in, I don't think it's plausible to imagine like a weird realm, right, where like reasons exist, like reasons not to do things or reasons for acting in general, right? I'm actually not sure anymore if, I was never really sure, but I think we can say that certain claims, like moral claims, are true without having any weighty kind of metaphysical implications. So, like, here's one example, and I wonder what you think about this. So, if I say, like, this table here is bigger than that table over there. Well, if I say that, if it's true, if I'm saying it's true, really strong sense, I think I would at least have to add tables to my ontology, right? Like to my list of things that exist. And that seems perfectly fine. But I don't know if I have to add the relation bigger than to my ontology. Because it seems to me like relations like that aren't things. Like they're not. I mean, this is kind of like, this is not at all original with me, but I think the philosopher Derek Parfit kind of explores this possibility of like, these statements can be true without having any ontological implications. I kind of think that might be the case with relations, or so the relation bigger than. That doesn't have to exist though, right? Like in anything like the way that I'm saying the tables exist. I guess what I'm saying is, could we say that reasons for action are like that too? So like they're kind of like relations. We can make true statements about reasons to do this or not to do that. They don't have to add anything to our ontology. What do you think about that?
So before going to reasons, I would ask, would you consider wrong to be similar to those relations?
So the way I understand term, right? So if we say it's wrong to kill an innocent person, I take that as a meaning there's a reason not to do it. That reason is I mean, some people think it is a kind of relation, I think. So what is that? I mean, it's a relation between certain facts in the world and an agent. For example, if we say torture is wrong, suffering that could be causing that individual gives you a reason not to do it. I mean, I think that is kind of like a relation. It's a relation between those facts and an agent. So in that sense, I think they are rather close. Yeah, the thought is just we can make true statements without actually crowding the universe, as it were, with more things. If that's has any plausibility, then that might be a one way that I can sort of lessen that kind of worry, or at least weaken the objection.
So I have currently only two understandings, or I'm operating with two senses of the term reason. One is that reason that someone has for doing something, and this reason is basically a motivating force for action. So it may be something in the person's mind that makes this person do this or that. So if there is a reason in this sense, then this reason is in this person's mind, so to speak. It may be an emotion or some cognitive thing. And another sense to understand reason is in a way external. So for example, what is the reason that that's snowing right now or whatever? It would be just an answer to a question about given process that's taking place. But it seems like you are not using any of these two senses, and yeah, I have a difficulty in saying what it means for a reason to exist in your sense.
Yes, you're right that I'm not using it in the first sense or neither sense, right? But it is really useful to and helpful distinguishing these. So philosophers often distinguish between like a motivating reason or like a explanatory reason and a normative reason, right? And the difference basically, I mean, as you know, is I mean, I guess one example is like this. So I forget whose example this is, but so the motivating reason or the reason that explains why someone, say, hurt their child or something might be that the child spilled some juice or something, right? But that's not a normative. Like they didn't have a normative reason. They didn't have a. In other words, that didn't justify it. That didn't make it okay, or one might say rational either, right? But I think when we talk about like a normative reason, we're kind of saying something that actually justifies or makes reasonable that act. And so that's basically the distinction. And I do think, for example, that that something will cause suffering to another is a reason not to do that act. You find that puzzling, right?
In a way, yes, because I'm just trying to figure out how this reason exists. Because if we are talking about motivating reason, then this is something in a person's mind, so it exists in the mind of the person in question. When we are talking about explanatory reason, then it's just an answer why this happened that someone can give or someone gave, or it can be said to be a preceding cause. But when we are talking about this normative reason, then I'm not sure in what way, what does it mean that it exists?
What does it mean that exists? Yeah, maybe I'll use the example I used in before, which is the. Actually, I don't remember what you said about this case, and this is the case of the person who is indifferent, right, to just future experiences, their own future experiences. So just don't care. And my claim was that basically they should care. That is, they have a normative reason to care about what happens to them in the future.
It's an interesting sentence. They have a normative reason, but it's definitely not a motivating reason.
It's not a well, yeah, because they're indifferent. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and it's not an explanatory reason because, again, it's contrary to the truth. So saying that they have a normative reason is also not clear in what way, what does it mean that they have it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you don't think that they should care about their future experience? Because that's really what I mean when I say there's a normative reason there. I'm not saying that they have it in the sense that obviously they don't appreciate it, right? Like they don't recognize that there is this reason to care. Nevertheless, I think I don't want to say it's there, right? Because then that invites like weird metaphysical. I'm definitely not saying, I should make this clear, right? I'm not saying that these reasons are like spatial temporal. Like I obviously, right? Like I'm not saying that there it is right there. They're not empirically discoverable things, I don't think, right? But I just think it's hard for me to believe, I guess, that this person has no reason or that the claim that they should care about their future experiences, discounting for uncertainty, things like that. It seems. Are you denying that? I guess you're saying if they don't care, they just don't care, and that's all there is to say about it.
So I would try to understand it through my framework that we talked about at the beginning. And I would say that caring for one's own future is rational because it is a correct thing to do in a sense. So it is an intelligent thing to do.
You don't want to say that they should. You don't want to use that language because you think that has certain ontological commitments. Like it comes with certain. Because I guess I'm trying to say, well, at least I'm just wondering if it does, you know?
I think I could preserve some of the language and saying that they should care about their own future or their future well-being. And this means that it's rational and it's correct to care about one's own future.
Okay. And I guess if that's what you're saying, so the important difference then between views that we're expressing is basically, would you say for you that the important difference is the metaphysical baggage, like the metaphysical implications?
In a sense, yes, because otherwise I would have a hard time trying to explain or even understand for myself what it means that they have a reason. So I'm just trying to go a step down to the layer of correctness, correct actions, behaviors, appropriate this and that, and not go up into some considerations about the existence of normative reasons.
I guess when I talk about normative reasons, I'm certainly not imagining something that kind of belongs to the agent, right? Like, I guess I'm really just saying there are certain facts that count against doing certain things or that count in favor of doing certain things. That doesn't seem all that worrying, does it, metaphysically? Because, like, that seems pretty reasonable, does it not? Like, that certain facts, like that, again, something will cause a lot of suffering, that counts in favor of not, say, inflicting pain, like, or not doing something that would cause that pain. I mean, isn't that, you wouldn't agree with that? I mean, so if the agent is indifferent to the stranger or, their suffering, nonetheless, I'm saying, even so, I think that there's still something there that counts against that the agent inflicting that harm. Do you disagree with that, or maybe you would agree as I just stated it?
I mean, certainly there are various facts or states of affairs that make one action wrong and another action right. And in this example, there also are various facts or considerations that would make certain behaviors correct or incorrect for this person to make. And if so, then probably this is my way of understanding what you are trying to say by saying they have a reason or that there is a reason, which just means that there are certain considerations that make this or that action or behavior right and normative. So maybe there isn't really difference on a deeper level, but maybe just how we try to explain it or the approach we're taking to it, but seems like we are at the point of contact now.
Yeah, because I guess it was important then to explain what I mean kind of by reason. I mean, in some ways it's not helpful, but it actually may be. So, yeah, really when I say something is a reason, I'm just saying it's a consideration that counts in favor or against, a certain type of action. So, when I start talking about like reasons, that does begin to sound like I'm kind of identifying a thing, a reason, and they're in the universe, like there are all these reasons. In a way, I see it as like attaching, I think this was sort of Scanlon's language, like attaching normative significance to certain facts. Again, I don't really think we're adding to, the list of things that exist. I just see it as, the same way that when I say something's bigger than something else, I don't really think I'm adding like anything weighty or like anything really robust or whatever, to my list, to my ontology, to my, list of things that I think exist. So, yeah, I feel like our views are not so different, really, but maybe they are.
Then I think I would even accept this because I can get back to the previous analogy with the jigsaw puzzle, and there certainly are various considerations that make this specific action of putting this piece of the puzzle to this place correct or incorrect, right? Like what piece of the puzzle you hold, what the pieces are on the table, how they are connected, and this all makes this action correct or incorrect. So in the moral domain, there of course also are various considerations about how the world is and how the world unfolds that make one action correct or right or morally binding, let's say.
Okay. Yeah, then it does seem like we're saying roughly the same thing, but using very different kind of language. I mean,
Yes, it seems to be the case.
yeah, yeah. Because I think your main worry, which is a quite a reasonable one, I think, is that it sounded like I was saying that, it almost sounds kind of like this Platonic thing, right? Like reasons in this weird realm. And yeah, and that does seem quite weird to me too. And not just weird, but as you said before in a earlier discussion, like that just seems very costly, metaphysically. I would be very uneasy about that if in fact that were an implication of you. I'm not sure, but again, I'm not. Yeah, I guess that's not really my view, and so we might both be wrong, but yes.
So I have a question for you now. So would you say that your position is a cognitivist position?
Good question. Yes, yeah, I think so, right? Because I'm saying, so if I say, let's take the statement like, well, let's just go back to the one we were using before, like it's wrong to torture children for fun. That for me just means there's a reason. I want to say a decisive reason. Let's just say other things being equal, it's wrong to torture children, something like that. There's a reason not to do that. But for me, a reason just means there's some consideration. These are facts, right? That count in favor of not doing it. So, like, I think that's true. I think that's a true statement, and so it would make me a cognitivist. I think. Well, not just that they're not just that it's true, but these are propositions. Like they're actually attempting to say something true, and this one I think happens to be true. Obviously, there are other ones that are false.
And how would you handle other types of moral claims like you shouldn't torture children for fun?
Yeah, I mean, this might be cheating or something, but that I actually understand those in terms of reasons as well. So, like, when I say, if I were to say you shouldn't torture children, that just means there are reasons not to do it. But if you're saying you shouldn't do it, I guess I should say to be more precise or something. Like, I guess it means there's a decisive or like sufficient, overall sufficient reason, something like that. But basically, I think you can analyze those kinds of statements in terms of reasons. That's how I understand basically all claims of that kind.
So when I say to you, you shouldn't torture children, it means that I'm actually saying there are decisive considerations, reasons against doing that.
That's what I think so. I think that, well, at least that's one view that I think is quite, has a lot going for it. When you say, yeah, you shouldn't do that. And what does that really mean? Aren't you really just saying there are reasons to do it? I mean, it's a strong claim. I mean, if you're saying you shouldn't do something, it's not just that there are reasons, right? Like those reasons are actually sufficient to outweigh any, should we say, countervailing considerations or something like that. But yes, I think I'm inclined to understand those things in terms of reasons, claims about reasons. If I can do that, then I don't think I have a problem.
I'm just wondering now, it seems that we are in every case talking about considerations such as states of affairs and facts, then everything can be at least captured by propositions on your account. So on your account, the is-ought gap is actually solved because you are rewriting ought statements into complex of is statements basically about how the world is.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that because, and I'm sure this is something that I'm just not really all that familiar with the literature on this. But like, yeah, it seems to me like yes, these are is statements. They're a specific kind of claim, right? They're claims about reasons. I don't think that. I mean, I actually agree, right, that you can't. I don't think you can just logically deduce a claim about reasons from just the facts. You need a rational judgment there, right? That like these facts do give us reasons or do count in favor of this or that or whatever. So I guess I would agree with that, that you can't logically deduce a statement about reasons from non-normative facts, should we say? Something like that. I would take that point. But yes, I think it's fine because you can that just means we need some kind of rational judgment that certain things do count against or in favor of certain kinds of actions. But I think but anyway, yes, they are a kind of is statement, right? I mean, not like totally different because they figure in arguments, for example. Like you can put moral statements into a logical, like a deductive argument,
I mean, just because people do it doesn't mean that it's correct to do it.
Well, no, that's true, but I mean, actually, that is an interesting. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that, the is all thing, but like, are you interested in Frege Geach problem, non-cognitivism? Like the problem of like if moral sentences, right, are just expressing, or basically that they're not expressing propositions. It's not clear how they function in like complex sentences. So usually the sort of example that's given is like a conditional. So like if you say like stealing is wrong, right? If that means something like ooh stealing or don't steal, well that's fine. But then if you plug that into an if then conditional, you get something like if stealing is wrong, then John shouldn't steal or something like that. What's interesting about that though is like when you put it into a conditional, you're not actually asserting, you're not saying that stealing is wrong, right? You're just saying if stealing is wrong, then blah blah blah. So the difficulty for the non-cognitivist, I guess, explain how exactly these moral sentences are supposed to work in more complex sentences. And I think the conditional is a good one because again, you're not actually expressing an emotion or anything here, right? You're just saying if stealing is wrong. You're not saying stealing is wrong. You're just saying if it is. So, sorry, I'm not sure if that you're interested in these sorts of difficulties for non-cognitivists.
Yeah, and I even thought about it recently. So, what I see is happening here is that we have a grammatical structure in language called the conditional, and people think that it expresses something like the material implication in propositional logic. And I think this is a conflation. So, in logic, material implication operates on propositions, obviously, and that's why we can create those deductive chains of reasoning because we have certain rules, we have certain forms, so axioms, and material implication is one of those forms on which we operate in logic. But when we have conditional in so-called natural language, it doesn't have to be the case that every conditional corresponds to material implication from propositional logic. So if I say, if you're ready, call me on Discord, I'm not expressing a material implication from propositional logic. Yet this is something that is understandable by a human.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something that can be reasoned through, reasoned about, but using reason in this maybe wider sense of the term, not the very restrictive computational or inferential sense. So reason is not just making inferences based on propositions and truth tables and so on, but we can operate on various types of sentences and speech acts and other things. We can operate on them in a rational way, even though they are not propositions. So there are, some directives like close the door, there are questions, there are even states like awa to express pain and so on. And somehow we as humans are able to properly understand what these statements mean. And we are also able to reason using these statements or based on these statements or speech acts, even though they are not propositions and they don't have to be true or false. And I just think that this restriction of reason to strict propositional logic is a mistake.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be more or less the way. It's something like that. That's how you would, I think, have to handle it on a non-cognitivist view. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So we actually do still largely agree, I think. At least differences were not as great as we thought.
And sorry, what would be your response to the Frege-Gitch problem?
Oh, well,
We are treating these types of conditionals as merely expressing propositions.
well, it's not really a problem for me, right? Because I'm a cognitivist. So, if are you saying what would be my? I mean, I think basically you just have to kind of say, okay, this is how we're something like this, like this is how we're using language in this kind of embedded context, and here's how we're using language in this other case, because there are other sentences, right? Like you could say, like it is the case that, or it is not the case that stealing is wrong. And like how does it function in that sort of sentence? I mean, you could. I think what you described is, I think, again, I'm not all that familiar with this, but I think that's basically how people try to, kind of deal with these sorts of how they're supposed to work in various complex sentences. I mean, but I guess the short answer is I don't worry about it because I don't take a non-cognitive position. Yeah, in terms of deep disagreements, I feel like maybe there aren't between our views because I'm not committed to strange realms, right? Like if I were, like if I was saying, I believe that there's a platonic, realm of, values and reasons, then I think that's a pretty substantial difference. But I think a lot of it's just how we're talking about this stuff, as you were saying.
Yes, it seems to be the case that we have at least we understand each other's positions right now, and we come to a very interesting point of contact. Yet still, you are a cognitivist and I am a non-cognitivist, and I am claiming that being a non-cognitivist is not a problem for reason and reasoning, and it is not a worse type of position. I wouldn't say that my position is anti-realist, let's say.
Okay. Yeah, and in fact, I mean, it seems like if you understand sentences like it's wrong to torture, and you understand that in terms of reasons, you analyze that in terms of reasons, and reasons are just, again, we're just saying that certain facts count in favor against certain actions. I mean, it seems like you pretty much are willing to say that those sorts of claims can be true or false, right? Because I thought that you were saying that, yeah, but there's a lot of ways that we use language, and some of the ways we use language within the moral domain, they're not even trying to express propositions. But you would say that a statement like, these facts count against doing this action. Are you basically willing to say that the statements of that sort, that kind, can be true?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, okay. Then I think our views really quite close. I mean,
Probably the only difference is right now that I wouldn't try to reduce or rewrite certain statements, like odd statements, into those is statements about facts. Because I think the intention of making such a statement is often different than just saying what is.
okay, I think I would maybe even accept that, right? I mean, if somebody says, "Hey, don't hurt that child," it may depend on their, as you were saying, like as you suggested, maybe it's the intention behind that, right? So like it may just be expressing attitude there or like an emotion. So in those cases, I think I would be willing to say that. I mean, the speaker is not trying to express a proposition in those cases. Yeah, so maybe if we really talk this through, it may be that there's really not much of a disagreement at all, because I'm actually agreeing that in those sorts of cases, no one's even trying to express anything that can be true or false.
Yes, actually, in this case, when someone says, don't hurt that child, someone is actually trying to change someone else's behavior. It's not even an expression of an attitude. If I say to you, could you pass the salt, please? Then I'm not expressing, I mean, it's not that I just express some attitude or some emotion, but I'm actually somehow, I don't know how to say it, I'm doing something so that you will do something. I'm trying to manipulate the world as if I were manipulating the world with my hands, but I'm just using language to do that. But in other cases, in other contexts, we have statements that include shoulds and oughts, like we should all go vegan, where it's not really the case that I'm trying to change your behavior or influence you specifically, but I'm just actually trying to express something different. And maybe it is a proposition, I'm not sure now, but it may be the case. So it all boils down to the fact that somehow, sometimes, for some weird reason, we just take grammatical structure of sentences too seriously. So when we see ought or conditional, then we think that it's this or that, but I don't really think that our model of the language that we use captures the nuance that we need to properly handle it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think we pretty much agree on that too. Okay. Interesting. All right. Good. Did you want to discuss other things? So that was all pretty much meta ethics. I don't know if you wanted to go into other subjects, but well, first I guess I should ask, like, if there's anything else you wanted to. Did we leave anything out?
I don't think so. We covered so much and we actually made an unexpected progress coming to this agreement. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was really great.
It's a rare thing in philosophy, maybe, or just conversation.